We have like the sprinklers in the back. Welcome everybody. The sprinklers in the back are like Shefa showers from Reb Shaila. That's so Rosh Chodesh Av, right, was yesterday, and like obviously like we always have this like daunting feeling, and we're supposed to be sad and supposed to be connected to. But I have this theory, and I think we learned it in Tanya, that anything that used to be accomplished with dinim, like in previous generations, like our generation does not need to go through those dinim. We don't need to go through those hardships. Like it used to be in previous generations that the way that it was, that we were like healed and the way that the klippas were removed was through like Holocaust and like scary times. And yes, we did have October 7th, but in general, our generation doesn't need to experience the dinim, and then Geula will happen b'rachamim. And the more that we believe it, the more that we tap into it, and we were talking about this last night, like is really like, it's father, right? It's not like a king. It's not a scary month. It's Av. It's a relationship that we have with our father, that we refer to Hashem as our father. So immediately by just saying the name of the month, you already know like you're in a comfort place. You're not looking at Hashem as a king. Hashem is a father. So like as kids, we were always taught like, oh, okay, Hashem took his wrath out on sticks and stones, right? And he didn't destroy us, right? Does anybody remember hearing that? Like as a kid, like Hashem put his anger on that, but we're still alive. But it's more than that. Like Rabbi Yossi was teaching us now in preparation, like leading into the 3 weeks, that the Beis HaMikdash was never really destroyed. I know this will sound like an illusion or trippy or whatever, but it was never really physically destroyed. It's just like under construction. And we have to believe that every time that it seemingly looked destroyed, what's happening is it's growing even stronger. It's building up even stronger. And now that we're getting much, much closer, it's like Ikvasa de Mashiach, we have to tap into that energy of being a hopeful month. And that's the day, Tisha B'Av is the day that Mashiach is going to be born. So it's like the day that you think it could be the worst, it is the best. And also, Av is, by the way, like much less than Tammuz. Because Av already has, Av already has, I think there's more chairs, I'm sorry. Av already has like a Nechama in it, right? Like Shabbos Nachamu comes right after. And then also, Av also has Tu B'Av, which is like the national, like, we joke that it's the Jewish Valentine's Day, but it's more than that than Valentine's Day. It's a moment where we see the feminine energy coming, like activating. It's a Mashiach holiday. It's not a Yontif that like none of us celebrate now. You don't have to, like white shirt reminder, it's, Tu B'Av, like, and then like the rest of the world picked up on it, by the way, like white parties, and then they have like, like shidduch opportunities, like on Tu B'Av, and that's because Tu B'Av is a very Mashiach holiday. So the closer we get to Mashiach, there are certain holidays that like lighten up. Let's say like Lag BaOmer. Like as a kid, Lag BaOmer was like, let's go to Marine Park. Like, I don't know, wherever. My brothers would go. Where would the boys go in Lag BaOmer? There was like this one field that they used to go to in Brooklyn, Reese Park. Yes. They would go to Reese Park, right? And they would play baseball, right? The ninth man on the team. That's what Lag BaOmer was. Now, as we're getting closer to Mashiach, we're like, oh, Lag BaOmer, Rishon Bar Yochai, oh, Pnimius HaTorah, oh, the secrets of the Torah, oh, the Arizal. All of a sudden, like, people are making bonfires with like real intention. I mean, like I see, like Moshe Weinberger started it here a bunch of years ago, like the Hilula on Lag BaOmer. Now it's just become so much bigger. Tu B'Av is one of those Yom Tovim also. It's like, what do we do on Tu B'Av? Like, do we really put on our white dresses and dance? I think there's a chair here also. Do we like put on our white dresses and go dance in circles like they did in the times of Mashiach? No, but we're sensing that it's a Mashiach Tika Yantiv, and as the fact that we're even talking about it means that it's already closer. So Av, even though it has like the most intense, it has the space for the most growth. And one thing that we've learned, like, is that the darker something is, then what?
The more light is buried.
The more light that's buried, right? So the darker, so let's say the more difficult a child, the more difficult a situation that you're in, you know that the light is going to come through, like it has to. So too, like Tisha B'Av is the saddest day of the year. It's our saddest day of the year. That's it. We're crying for something we don't even know what we're crying for. But really, what we are crying for, and I think this has to do with the last class of Tanya. We were really talking about this last night. Is that, remember in the last, if anybody was taking Tanya the first time around, we spoke about like the fact that we don't have a Beis HaMikdash, is that we don't have a space for Hashem anymore. It used to be that Hashem's light went straight from the world of Atzilos, and it went straight through directly into the world of Asiya, because there's 4 worlds. So it went from the upper world straight to the lowest world, and that's why living the Beis HaMikdash times was miraculous. It was like so clear. Hashem's presence took the express train straight to Yerushalayim, like straight to the place of the Beis HaMikdash. Now it has to go through so many layers, and I'm always like, is this Hashem? Like, I'm doubting it because it's concealed with so many layers. So what we're yearning for is that strong connection of Hashem being able to go from Atzilos straight into this world of Asiya that he purposely created. So the more that we daven for him, the more space that we make for ourselves, whether in our houses, whether in our shuls, whether within our families, the more space we're saying, okay, I know the Shekhinah doesn't have the Beis Hamikdash to rest in, but he could rest in my house. He could come into my kitchen. Like, I'll be nice to my kids. Like, I'll, and then you start thinking like, oh, I want my Shabbos table today. Like, like Thursday night is the Rizal's Yartzeit, and my husband came home from shul, and he's like, everyone wants to pressure me with these things, and he's like, so could like we maybe host the site for the? I'm like, yeah, in. Like, we were just by the Arizal in Eretz Yisrael, and that's obviously like a tzaddik calling us. And then I was like, wait, the Arizal's Yartzeit is in the month of Av. Like, once you start learning Pnimius Torah, once you start learning Chasidus, you're like all of a sudden immediately connected to the Arizal, and you don't even realize it, but you're like, oh, now I'm connected to Tanya, now I'm connected to the Lubavitcher Rebbe, now I'm connected to the Arizal. So when you learn this Torah and connect to these tzaddikim and then recognize that they're shining their light in this month, you're like, I like this month. Even though it's a little hard with the playlist, I had to throw in some a cappella. I threw in the Nechama at the end. So save that till after Tisha B'Av. Don't listen to the last song. But the Nechama is very personal to me, so I'll share that, and then we'll get into Tanya. So I have a Nechama, for those of you who know, and she was not the easiest child. Like from when she was born, it was like from the minute I was pregnant with her. It was just like one of those that are just like, I was like super sick, gained 5 pounds the whole pregnancy, which you're like, oh, that's amazing, but like not when you find out that like you have IUGR and like she wasn't growing and she wasn't developing, and it was like the craziest time of my life. And then she was born the day after Tisha B'Av, and we named her on Shabbos Nachmu, and we just named her Nechama. We didn't even, I was like, Nechama Leah, my grandmother was Chana Leah, but I couldn't name Chana, so it was just like Nechama Leah. And like I didn't, in hindsight, everybody, I'm sure like people have had this, I feel like we've had this discussion about like when you name your child, like you really do have some sense of Nevuah. Anybody ever feel that? Or you're like, no, I just have to name after my grandmother, and that's it. And then you're like, her name was Shoshana, we'll call her Rosie. Do love the name Rosie. And my grandmother, she lived 120. I always say this, like, Bella is just the best name, Bella Bloomstein. And literally, like, Kenai Nahara, she's 96, poo-poo, maybe she's even older, she just doesn't tell us, but like, those names. So, and then only after that first year of life did we realize, like, we didn't know what the struggles that was going to be, whether it was in the hospital and feeding tubes and doctors and everybody telling us different things and clinically diagnosing her with all these syndromes. And then when I actually got results back that it was negative, I remember like I called my husband and I was like in Trader Joe's parking lot and I'm like, it's negative, like she's okay. And then he's like, that's so crazy. I was just listening to Rav Yossi talking about what a Nechama is. And literally Nechama, like a Nechama is very different than a Yeshua. And that's why, by the way, this is like the theme of the month, should really be Nechama. So if anybody has a Nechama or their names are Nechama, connect to this concept of Nechama. Like, what's the difference between Nechama and Menucha? Literally in the hospital, we're like on the phone with Reverend Moshe Weinberger. We're like, so explain the difference, because I was like, Nechama, my husband's like, no, Menucha. And I'm like, okay, well, wait, which one is it? Menucha means rest, but Nechama means comfort. And Nechama is the deepest level of, well, when you say it's a Nechama, deepest level of a healing, as opposed to a Yeshua. A Yeshua is, I had cancer, and thank you Hashem, I was cured. A Nechama is that you realize that, first of all, there's no such thing as cancer. Like, it's not even there. But even whatever you did have was there for you, and you probably never even realized that from the beginning, it was all for the good. So like in the song, actually the Nechama again, it says the greatest level of Nechama is when you can look back and you can say that everything was planned and perfect, and that's exactly how it's supposed to be. And like, I only realized, oh, there are no more chairs? No, I think there are. I saw 11 people said they're coming, so I was like, okay, I'll set up 10 chairs, but thank you, Hashem, you're amazing. There should be more. Yeah, sorry. We have to work on the chair. Gamach, yeah. So as opposed to Yeshua saying like, okay, you had what you had, and now you're healed, and now you're better. Nechama was like, you never even had it. And it was just like, I was sitting there, and like every time I pull into Trader Joe's, I'm always like stressed out from that parking lot, but I will always remember this conversation. I walk in there and I'm like, she never even had the problem. And that's the greatest level of comfort, is when you realize that your problems were never a problem. Your financial stress was never really a stress. Your spouse being difficult was never really difficult. Everything was there for you, and everything was planned and perfect, and that's the greatest level. And that's what we're going to realize when the Geula comes, when Mashiach comes. We're going to be like, oh, that was never really a problem? Like, all the Palestinians were never a problem? Oh, that was never, this was all part of it? It's a very deep level to be able to reach, because you have to then find Hashem in the Tzimtzum. Like, we talk a lot about it in Tanya, about like Tzimtzum, and Hashem like pulling himself back. And you're always like, yeah, Hashem pulled himself back to make space for us. The pulling itself back, we should never think that Hashem disappeared. You have to believe that Hashem is there even in the pulled back. Whatever Hashem drew himself back from, in that darkness, Hashem's also there. So I say it to myself till I turn blue, and I'm like, everything is for the good and everything's for the best, and that's the true definition of Nechama. And that's really like the theme of this month. So like in the playlist, there's songs of like me and Achemoti, like who's going to comfort us, right? Who did actually comfort us? Who is that person in the Gemara that they said, oh, you comforted us? Akiva, right? Akiva was able to see that the foxes, right? Like, remember that story, the Shualim? Right? I'm always like, I have like this, I construct this like perfect image of like ruins and like a fox like running through, right? And I'm like, that is something that Akiva laughed at. The truth is, because he saw, he's like, once you see the destruction, you know it's going to be good. So we always say, like, you hit rock bottom, that's it. It has to be that the like higher is going to come. So really, we hit rock bottom in this month because our Beis Hamikdash was destroyed. But Hashem's like, I'll flip it on its head. Mashiach's going to be born. Tu B'Av, which is a Mashiach Tekayantif, and it's going to be good. So, like, can't be sad. I know. You have to say it to yourself, like, all the time. There are times and places to be sad, but as long as you connect to the right aspect of the sadness and know that that will be transformed into the greatest light, then there it is. Okay, makes sense? So we're not sad anymore? Okay. Fine. Okay, we're good. I know, it's very hard to be sad. Okay, so for those of you who are totally new, welcome. And we're up to chapter 11. So Chase Ab always says, like, you can remember chapter 11 is bankruptcy, so it's the bad guy, it's the Russia. So one thing that we've been saying is that this, what is this book actually called? Sefer Habenonim, right? So we said in the first chapter, we introduced 3 characters. They were the Tzaddik, the Rasha, and the Benoni. So why do we need to know these 3 characters if all we're really striving to be Benoni? Is because, like, we need a point of reference. We need to know, like, what we are, what we could be, what we're not going to be. So we have 3 characters. They're like put on serving platters. They're like, okay, so here we have the Tzaddik. So we spent like 3 weeks talking about the Tzaddik. I always feel like we spend a lot of time on like the positive things. And then like the Rasha is like 1 chapter. And then there's like 4 chapters on the Benoni. So we'll get through the Rasha. We'll do it like quickly. But the reason that we need to hear these characters is because we have to know like where we stand and what we're striving for. So I think like one big disclaimer that we have to make when it comes to Tanya is that Tanya Tzaddik and Tanya Rasha are not like, oh my gosh, you're such a little tzaddikal, and like, ooh, he's a bad person, that's a Rasha, right? Like, it's not bad versus like, you get a lot of mitzvah notes. Like, it's not, it's very different, and it has its own language. And the way that we describe tzaddik, let's see who remembers. There's 2 types of tzaddik. I feel like I'm testing it. Tzaddik v'ralo, a tzaddik who still has like a little bad in him, and then there's Tzaddik v'tovlo. Tzaddik v'tovlo is what? What does he have? We're all combined with 2 souls, right? We're all comprised of an animal soul and a godly soul, right? The Tzaddik v'tovlo has 0 temptation that what? What happens? His nefesh habahamis flips. And now he has 2 yitzer tovs. So he is like pure goodness. He's like the kid who gets like hundreds on their desk, right? No, more than that. It's a person who has 0 temptation and is actually like repulsed by doing something wrong. Like, it's like he can't even like think about it. So that's like a very, very small niche of Yidden that are sprinkled through the generation. And those are huge tzaddikim who have 0 drive to do anything wrong. Then there's a tzaddik v'ralo. He's a tzaddik, but he still has ra. Now, one thing we have to like also like big disclaimer is that there's no, ra is not bad. How do we describe ra? Ra is, we use the word that like, it's not like you're evil. It's like sitra achra, right? It's the other side, or it's selfish. It's like, right, it's sitra achra, because sitra achra means I'm not doing it for Hashem. Everything that we're supposed to be doing is for Hashem. But when we're not aligned with Hashem, it's called sitra achra, which is the other side. It means like, maybe I'm doing it for myself. Maybe this makes me feel good. Like, oh, I feel like I did my like, spirituality for the day, and like now I can go to the beach, right? And like I'm fine. But like that was just mean that this Torah learning was for my own good. No, I have to believe that this Torah learning, and every single one of you have to believe that everything that we're doing is just to get me closer to Hashem, and not just to fulfill my need, not because it's trendy to be learning, and not because Tanya is like the thing to be learning. It is the thing to be learning, but like it's something when you align it with Hashem's will, then that's really like the way of flipping it. That's what he does. Every single thing is for Hashem, and anything that's Hashem tells us not to do is repulsed by it. But a tzaddik v'ralo, he doesn't do it, but he's not like Like, it's not like like, you know, wait for it, it's just like feh. Like, it's not like that. Like, you know, it's not like, oh, it's so bad. He has it, it's dormant. He doesn't ever do it, but it's not like something that he's like disgusted by, okay? So we have those two types of tzaddikim. Now we have on the other extreme, and this is the way that like Torah is, like zelu u'maseh, like that's actually from Shlomo Amel says in a Mishnah that everything in this world has its counterbalance. So if there's tremendous good on one side, then there's going to be tremendous bad on the other side. Now when we say bad, remember, it's selfish, okay? It's not bad, it's not evil, it's not like, you know, that emoji, the red one that looks like Esav, you know that one? It's like so scary. Is it recording? I think so, yeah. It's not like, you know what I'm talking about, that like scary monster one. I'm like, what is this, right? So it's not that. It's just somebody who's very, very selfish. So now, just like we have two tzaddiks, two levels of tzaddikim, we have two levels of Rashan. But the way that I want you to imagine it is like a mountain, like a triangle, okay? So over here on the right-hand side, we have the best version of a tzaddik, which is a tzaddik v'tovlo. Then like a little bit higher up, we have a tzaddik v'ralo. On the top of the mountain, imagine a Benoni. Then we have two levels of Rasha over here, okay? So just imagine like that. Because what's interesting is that on the other side of the Rasha, who's compared to the Rasha, there's a tzaddik v'ralo is keneged a Rasha v'tovlo. And then the tzaddik v'tovlo is keneged, right? Remember like that in school, like keneged, the Rasha v'ralo. So you have either extreme on the bottoms, and then the not so extreme, and then the Benoni that we're striving for at the top. Does that make sense? Do I need a whiteboard? We get it? Yeah? Okay, fine. So we have two extremes of tzaddik, two extremes of Rasha, and today we're going to talk about the Rasha. Okay, now why do we need to know this? Like, what? Like, we're not Rasham. Then I'm like, as I was preparing this, I'm like, actually, maybe we are. But like in a Tanya Rasha. But let's try to understand why we are. What is this? What are these types of Rasham? Okay, so any questions before we go in? No? We're good? Okay. So like this. It says, Zelu u'maseh. So the way that Hashem created this world is that everything has its opposite with the other. So it's like everything has a counterbalance. Like if there's extremely, I don't know, I'm like looking at coffee. There's like really good coffee and like really delicious food. There's also like really bad food that's like bad for you, right? Anything that's in this world can have its counterbalance. So let's say like, for example, during the times of Beis HaMikdash, we were like so busy with Avodah Zarah. Like, no? You know what I'm talking about? Like, we were like, Baal Pa'ar, like all days. Like, you read through Navi, like I was doing Nachyomi. I'm like, guys, like, stop bowing down to Baal Pa'ar. Like, just stop it. And then they're like the kings, like, and they set up an Avodah Zarah in the north and an Avodah Zarah in the south. I'm like, what are they doing? Like, and then that was blocking them from going to the Beis HaMikdash. I'm like, take a detour, like, go to the Beis HaMikdash. But it was so strong, their drive to do Avodah Zarah. And the counterbalance in the world at that point was actually Nevuah. So being able to speak to Hashem and, like, have moments with Hashem is the opposite of Avodah Zarah. Because think about it, Avodah Zarah is like, I'm connecting to this, it's Sitra Achra. But the other extreme was that we had prophecy. We were able to talk to Hashem. And then when the first Beis HaMikdash was destroyed, I talk about this a lot, we told Hashem, like, please take away this drive for Avodah Zarah. Like, it's so, like, all we want to do is build Avodah Zarahs and, like, bow down to Baal Pa'ars. I don't know why that's, like, the main one that I always think about. That is the main one, right? Yeah, I know. I just learned a little bit more about it, and I'm like, whoa. Anybody like remember that stories? Like it's like intense. Yeah, what they did. Rabbi Yossi was talking about it, and I forgot one of the maybe Yeshua show. What? It was in the parasha a few weeks ago. Oh, that's why. So we asked Hashem, could you take away this drive for Avodah Zarah? And Hashem's like, okay, I'll take it away, but I have to take out the opposite of it, which is the good, which is prophecy. So that's where we lost Nevuah. So we gave away Avodah Zarah, we gave away that drive for Avodah Zarah, but Hashem's like, then the world is not going to be balanced. There's going to be too much good in this world, and then you're never going to choose good. You're just going to do good because that's what it is. So then Hashem he took away Avodah Zarah, but he also took away that. So now we have two extremes. We have a tzaddik in the world, but Hashem says, listen, I made some tzaddikim. I sprinkled tzaddik gomer all over the world. Remember another name for the tzaddikim were bnei aliyah, like people, men of ascent, men who like knew how to take everything and elevate it to Hashem. So Hashem says, I'm going to give you that on one extreme, but I'm also going to give you a Rasha on the other side. So who is this Rasha and what does he do? So we start with like the not such bad Rasha. We could start with like the Rasha V'tovlo. He has good in him. So when you think of a Rasha V'tovlo, what do you imagine?
They conquer whatever they're like.
They're battling.
Their inner struggle, yeah.
Right, but then why they Russia? So they have Tovlo because they conquered it, but why they Russia?
Every second of their day, in their head and in their heart, they want to do bad.
Right.
That's their natural inclination.
So it's interesting what you're saying, the natural inclination. It's our default setting. Russia is our default setting. Like, we have to constantly work. Our default setting is like to chill, do nothing, be busy with Averos, feed our Nefesh HaBahamis, right? Because we started off with the Nefesh HaBahamis. We started off with this animal soul that has drugs. So our default setting is wanting to do that. But conquering it is like an avodah. It's a practice, and we have to constantly do it. Now, a Benoni, and I'll skip to next chapter, a Benoni always controls his struggles. Always. Don't think a Benoni is like, middleman. I always think like, remember we used to learn like Tzaddik, Rosh Hashanah, the scales, and it's like, imagine yourself that if you did one more mitzvah, then it would weigh down the mitzvah thing, and then it would be good. That would be like Rosh Hashanah, high school interpretation of even elementary school. Yeah, we need a scale, right, of like your good deeds and your bad deeds, and then one good deed could tip the scale. So a Benoni is always perfection. A Benoni is what we're striving for. A Benoni has struggles inside, but always conquers it. A Rasha, however, doesn't always. So he's Rasha because he's sometimes selfish, and he doesn't always conquer his Yetzer Hara. And Vitovlo, that when he does it, he regrets it. He feels a little bad. And it could be that he does it very, very few times, but he's still considered a Rasha. So you have to like take out that imagery of like what a Rasha is, and it's not that emoji.
Why is he considered a Rasha?
Because a Rasha is just somebody who does something selfishly. And if he's not connecting it to Hashem at all the time, because he's not, he makes mistakes, he slips up, he feels bad about them, but he still makes mistakes, he's still considered a Rasha. That's the character that he is. So not in like a scary way, because like we're always thinking like Rasha, like a Rasha is like a bad person, right? Happens to be, I'm like relearning this now the second time. We did Tanya the first time, and I very much didn't realize how connected it was to Yidden. Like, we're talking about Yidden. We're not talking about, like, Hitlers. Like, I kept using, like, Russia as, like, a Hitler person. It's not. It's actually Yidden. We're talking about us. People who have a Nefesh HaBahamis and Nefesh Elokis. But they sometimes mess up. Now, what he talks about here in the parak is different levels of messing up. And some of them are not so bad. Some of them are obviously, like, murderous. But he only murders once. He only did it once. He's still considered a Russia. Right, it's like we gave this example last time. Like, I run red lights, but like only sometimes, right? Like, do you want to put your kid in the car with somebody who runs red light? No, doesn't matter. Even if you feel bad about it. Like, I feel so bad. I do that. I go through red lights. I'm like, Livia took Sarah Sasha. Like, I just like say a parak of Tehillim, right? You're doing wrong. You feel bad about it, and you hope for the best, and you hope that next time. That's the definition of a Rasha Vitovlo. Somebody who messes up, regrets it, could be amazing for weeks on end, but makes mistakes. A Benoni never makes mistakes. Right. So that's why after I did this, I'm like, okay, we're all Rasham. But we're all Tanya Rasham, and that's okay. Like, we'll embrace it, right? Not a regular Rasham. Our goal is to be. Right. So now it's like, after this paragraph, I'm like, okay, let's like put the tzaddik like totally aside, and let's just focus on this, right? Let's even be a Rasha B'Tovlo, by the way. Let's just aim for that.
But you're saying you could change.
Yeah, you could change. And you could be many characters throughout the day. Like, we should never be concerned. Yeah, like, you could wake up and have a tzaddik-like moment in the morning. And you're like, Taman Brachos, I'm so holy, right? And you're calm with your kids, and then you get in the car, and then you lose it. And then you're like, okay, that was Rosh Hashanah because I feel bad. Then you continue in the car, and then you do something that you used to do, but you stopped doing. So let's say I used to run red lights. Now I stopped, right? Sorry, don't come in the car with me. Like, if it's 11 o'clock, I'm not waiting on my corner. Anybody ever get stuck here at this light here? 6 minutes. 6 full minutes. The only worst light might be Meadow, but I think Causeway is the worst. The worst light. So when I started teaching my daughter how to drive, you're allowed to make a right on red there, but I was like, no, you're like 17, you can't make rights on red. Every single car behind us is like honking. I'm like, hey, forget it, just go, just do it. Like, you know? So let's say I stopped running. Like, I used to do that, but that is an area of my life where I conquered. I'm a Benoni when it comes to driving. Do you see what I mean? Like, or let's say like Lashon Hara used to be my default
Russia
thing.
and Benoni are different things.
Yeah, in all different,
It's not a one thing.
You're not like all of it. We're striving for perfection of a Benoni, but like you can end up like on the right side and on the left side, like throughout the day. And as long as you tap into it, bottom line, like we're spending a lot of time on Tzaddik and Rasha, we're going to spend the most time on Benoni because that's really what we're looking for. But we want to understand who these people are as a perspective. Like we want to see it. We want to know about it. Does that make sense?
Why not strive to be a tzaddik?
Mary, here we go. I have to defer to Mary.
Or just continue.
No, it's a very good question.
It's a good question. A tzaddik it's a gift from Hashem. So
You were born that way,
you
right?
were
Like
born, you were born
Lady
with
Gaga.
that potential.
Then there's a Russia.
You were born
Not
with that
hers, but
potential. You had to be given a tzaddik neshama, and you were born with that potential. Not every tzaddik becomes a tzaddik, but when they do the work, it's given as a gift from Hashem that they are a tzaddik. So that's why our goal. We don't know what type of neshama we have, so our goal is to become a Benoni, which everyone has the potential to be a Benoni.
Do they?
Yeah.
Why?
Because
But
we
like
have the
with life-
koichas, because we have Hashem created us in a way with like the drives, and we have sense of control, but it has to come through Torah. Like you have to learn it, you have to practice it. I mean, this is why like Hasidim, they spend their whole life learning it. Tanya is considered like the Torah Shabbat of Hasidus. Actually, just got a kids version of it. Somebody bought it for me, and I want to like do it with my kids at night. It's like living lessons in Tanya, and it's like great. It's like short story. Each parak has like a little story. Like a little bit of the Torah, like a little bit, like something from the Rebbe, and it's like on one page and it's colorful and pictures. It's like, okay, like instead of Amelia Bedelia at night, like I could just read this to her, and you could teach them that they do have the ability to. We do. Like otherwise, yeah, that definitely we do have the ability, but not a tzaddik. That's a separate category. I mean, that's like a gift.
There's
But
only
you
a
can
certain
have,
amount
there's only a
per
certain amount.
generation.
But you can have tzaddik like moments, like throughout the
Yeah.
day, like all the time. Yeah. Okay, fine. So let's read it inside for a second, and we'll get to the question. So basically, he says that Rasha v'tov lo l'umat tzaddik v'ralo. So the Rasha that has good in him is literally compared to the tzaddik that has bad in him. Like it's that either extreme. Okay. An incomplete tzaddik is like a tzaddik v'ralo. Tzaddik v'tov lo. What does it say? It says Dehainu shahatov shebenafsho halokis. Shebemocho ubechlal hayamino shebelibo. That in other words, what it's saying is that the good in him is subjugated to the ra. What's a tzaddik viralo? What's a rasha viralo? He's a rasha. Sorry. What's a rasha vitovlo? What's a rasha that has some good in him? It means that he has good, but his good is like subjugated. It's like leaning. You know, like when the wind is blowing it, it's pulling it to the ra. It's bent over. Like you ever see like I went yesterday on this hike, and like clearly there was like a serious rainstorm before because every single tree was like split in half. So like every tree looked like an L. It was like a standing tree, and it was like this. It was like bent over. So what you have to imagine is that what's the Rosh Hashanah? He has good within him, but that good is leaning in to what? To his animal soul, right? We have, remember that, and we'll explain this. Remember we gave that mashal in Parak Tess about the two cities, right? That there's one city and two kings, and who's going to get into the car first? A Rosh Hashanah is the animal soul got in the car. He got into the car first. He got the keys first, and he's riding you for the day. That's really what it is. It's subjugated to, it's bent over to the Ra. The Zem is Chalik Gam Kain L'Rivavos Madrigos Chalkos. And there's endless levels of this type of Rosh Hashanah. There could be a Rosh Hashanah. He gives examples that do like minimal things. The example that Chase Taub gave, and like obviously I can't get it in my head now, is that you're not supposed to eat till you hear Havdalah, which is really hard because our husbands come home like way past 72. They keep like 96 minutes. I don't know what that is, but like, so it's hard like to not eat before Havdalah. That is something the Shulchan Aruch says that you're not supposed to do, but because you do something even minimal, like that's a very small one. That's not murder. He didn't kill anybody, and he did it, and he felt bad. That's like a small like gradation of a tzaddik, of a Rasha v'tovlo. So he's a good guy, but it doesn't always come out good. It's not an evil person. It's not Esav. It's just a person who literally rationalizing. Yeah. Oh, remember we spoke about that? Like what's rationalizing is when you do something with your heart and then you go up and tell your brain like it's really okay. Like it was litova. Like it was lashon hara for helping the person, right? Like you go up there and you tell yourself, you tell your brain, but also there is a sense of guilt. Like I feel a little bit bad. Maybe that was not the right thing to do. But the levels, and there's like different shades of Rasha v'tovlo. So what does he say? He gives an example. Yesh mi shakfifa v'habitol etzlo ma'at mizaer. It's like a teeny little thing that maybe he did wrong. V'af gam zos eno b'tmidias. Even that thing that he does, like runs red lights, but like he really doesn't do it often. Like it's very, very little. Like, and basically, and I'm just using running red lights as an example because you know that if you run a red light and it's that one time that was wrong and there's an accident, like that's it. So to that degree, even though it's like, oh, I don't do it so often, it could be very dangerous and it could be very serious, and that's not something that we want to do. So he says that this is the kind of a person, only on a rare occasion will the evil in him overwhelm him. It'll overwhelm the good and it'll conquer the city. Remember we said our body is like a little city. Who's going to conquer the city? Who's going to get there first? So only very little bit does he do it. And even then, the evil may not conquer his whole body, but maybe it's only a part of a body. Remember when we said that we do good, it affects us on 3 levels. Like when we want to bring Hashem into this world. This was like way back, maybe like Parak Daled, where when, let's say we explain that, how does the soul interface in this world? Like how does the soul come into this world? Through 3. Yay, I'm so happy. I'm like, let me stall. Someone's going to get the answer, right? In our thought, speech, and action. When we want to bring Hashem into this world, right? Hashem is invisible. But what's the interface? What's the way? What's the paper doll that we put on? Thought, speech, and action. And when in our thought, speech, and action, we bring Hashem into all those places light up, and then we bring goodness into this world. What we're saying here is that a Rasha, V'tovlo, like it could be that like the evil will only infiltrate his thoughts, or the evil will only infiltrate his actions. He doesn't like become like fully enclosed in like Russia mode, right? Like, I don't know, like Transformers, right? Like all of a sudden, Power Rangers, that's what I used to watch. Like they go into their gear, right? It didn't affect them on so many levels. It only affected them, let's say maybe in their thought. Okay, so what's an example of something that infiltrated your thought? And then you feel bad about it. And then you're like, oh my gosh, I never want to do that again.
Like shame and guilt and like those thoughts.
Yeah, right. Those are really bad thoughts. Those are really bad stuff. Like we are supposed to be taking care of ourselves. We're not supposed to shame ourselves. We're not supposed to tell us like, oh, you're such a bad person. No, even those intrusive negative thoughts, like getting into our mind, and then you have to be like, hey, stop. Hey, don't talk to yourself like that, right? That's an example. What about an action? What's like something that just affected my action? See, we never do any bad. It's so good, right? What? Screaming at a kid, right? Like all of a sudden, and like your mind wasn't there. It just like came out in your speech, right? Or like, right? Let's say speech, right? Versus action, right? So it only affected my speech. Like I didn't even really like get mad at the kid, but like my go-to is to just scream. So I'm like, get in the car, and then I'm like, no, really, like you're only 2, like you don't even know how to climb in, and like it's much easier if I really actually just put you in and strap you, because if I let you go in by yourself, you're gonna climb to the back seat, and then I have to go into the trunk to get you, right? And then it's like it becomes a whole situation, right? I'm in like the terrible 2s right now. I mean the amazing 2s. I shouldn't say that, but like it's like of course I love him. Of course in my mind I only think good about it, but like maybe my speech comes out in a way where I'm not happy with you, right? But then I immediately feel bad, and I'm like, I can't yell at you. You're 2, right? So that's one idea. Let's say an action. Let's say
The light switch on Shabbos. That's like every, without fail.
Baba steak the oven, right? Like, or for me all the time, I lean on my oven, my
Dishwasher does that.
your dishwasher just like talks
Yeah.
to itself, right? I know. Like my oven, if you Baba steak, like even not even if you lean, like if you just hover in that area, like it pushes the button and the light goes on and then it starts clicking, like, and I'm like, there was no intention for doing it. It actually happened. Okay, obviously I feel bad about it, right? Thank you, Hashem. Like hopefully all of us feel bad about it. So that's the levels of like, it can infiltrate, but it doesn't have to be your whole body, okay? And there's also levels of it. How many times you flick the switch off by mistake on Shabbos? How many times you by mistake eat before Havdalah, right?
The shogeg or b'mezid?
So it's b'mezid.
Yeah, so you're saying
So what I'm,
shogeg.
what's your intention when you're by mistake shining your light? You're holding up your kids, right? So no, but it's not b'shogeg. No, it's not b'shogeg. No. It's with intention. It's something with intention. I before Havdalah. Right. Okay. I said lashon hara, and I didn't. And at the moment, I didn't feel bad, but after, I do feel bad. Right. So the after I felt bad is the key to saying you're a rasha, but you're tov. Okay. The opposite extreme would be a rasha baralo. So let's just quickly go through the examples that he gives good examples. Okay. So he says maybe you'll just do the action. Dahainu oben ma'aseh levad la'asos averos kalos. It could be that in the realm of action alone, you carried out like a minor transgression and not a major one. Okay, so eating before Havdalah. Everyone is going to be like, could you just make Havdalah already? Okay, so because he says because even one transgression will make you a rasha, you fall under that category of it, even if it only affected your action. Or maybe it was just lashon hara. He says obedibor lavad. Maybe it was just with speech. Lidaber avak lashon hara, like not even real lashon hara, but like avak lashon hara, or leitzanas, or just like mockery, or just like making light of a situation. That's or borderline mockery, or like slander. That's all falls under the category of rasha v'tovlo. And then he says oben machshava, or with your thoughts. And by the way, like sometimes you think like I only thought about it, but sometimes the thoughts are worse than the action. Jealousy, right? Like in your head, and then like you harp on it and you don't act upon it. Like you don't go and like steal somebody's like diamond ring. Like we don't do that. But like if you eyeing it and you're like, is that lab grown? Is that really nice? Like where did she get that? Is that like who bought it for her? Right? All those thoughts, like those intrusive thoughts that are coming in, you're fantasizing about like how am I going to get that? Right? Or even it actually goes through, like the Baal Tanya says, like you're even thinking about committing, let's say like sexual thoughts. This is obviously a little bit more for men because he says that like the thoughts that you have really affect you later on through the day. Like that's really what happens. So he says sometimes these thoughts are considered worse than sin since they contaminate your highest faculty. They contaminate your mind. So the Maharal says that when something enters your mind, sometimes it's even worse than the actual action that you're doing because it ruminates and it sits there. So like negative thinking is really... Or like even like we were just talking about like negative thinking even about yourself. Like that's harming you. It's not a good place. Like you don't want to be lost in that space of like negativity to yourself. Sometimes we think like, oh, that maybe will help my self-esteem. Maybe I'll be a little bit more humble if I put myself down. Negative thoughts are not good and that's not really where you want to be. And you don't want to live in those negative thoughts. It's just not a good place. So basically what the Baal Tanya is wrapping up here before we go to the Rosh Hashanah, he says that bottom line, we all have impulses. We're all going to feel certain things, whether it's jealousy and or thoughts, or just like let's say fantasizing thoughts, or negative act, like anything that we're having. These natural impulses we all have. The question is, are you going to let them live in your head? Like how long are you going to let them sit in your head? So don't think like, oh my God, I can never be jealous of anyone. I can't think of anything because I'm a rasha v'tovlo if I think these things. No, we all will feel things, and it's just how much do you let into your head. Like one of my favorite stories from Rashi's Taub is like a person who was saying like, oh, I don't have control over the things that I think about, right? This guy was having like intrusive thoughts and he was just like, I'm thinking negative things. I'm thinking like, being intimate with other people, all these things that he didn't like. And he went to his Rebbe and he said, what should I do? And he sent him to this tzaddik who lives in a far out town and he said, go talk to this guy. And when he got there, it was Erev Shabbos, and he was knocking on the door, and he heard the house was like flying, and like chicken soup was spilling, and like he's like, I know somebody's in there, but they weren't letting him in. And he kept knocking, and they weren't letting him in. And he ended up in shul Friday night and slept on a bench, and someone invited him in and gave him a food and meals, whatever. And then when it came out to Shabbos, that tzaddik who he went to go see was like, oh, do you want to come over for Havdalah? Don't make brachos. Don't eat food for Havdalah. So he's like, do you want to come to my house? And he was like, okay, yeah. Like you ignored me for like 24 hours. Like where were you? And I even knocked on your door. And he's like, when something knocks on the door, you don't always have to let it in. And that was the lesson. Like you might have thoughts. Like, and it's normal to have these thoughts. Like, especially sometimes on Rosh Hashanah when I'm like, what is she wearing? Her kids are so cutely matched. I need to go to tassels, right? Like you have these things and you're like, that's normal. Like you should be thinking those things and that's a normal way, but acting upon them is the problem. And don't think for 1 second that like, if it's just in my head, it's not so bad. It is, but if you let it ruminate. But we have those intrusive, we can have impulses, but just don't act on them. And the more you don't act on them, the better you get at becoming the perfect Beinoni. Okay, so he says it could even be, let's say, like what's another example of Rasha v'tovlo is Oshe yesh hakosher la'asok b'torah. It could be that he had like good davening time, let's say, or like learning time, la'asok b'torah. Let's say like this morning, my mother had my kids, they slept over there last night, and like I got up this morning and I'm like, like I had such good time for myself, and I was like, I'm gonna go for a run, and because I was like, I don't have to wait for anybody to wake me up, and then I was like, that's amazing, and I listened to it, but I'm like, but I really have to prepare Tanya, right? Like, that was like my first thought. So I was like, oh, I can actually utilize that time for good, or I can scroll on my phone for 6 hours. I don't know if you've ever done that or gotten lost in your phone. So like, you have time and you don't use it properly, that's also Rasha v'tovlo. Like, you had time that you could have connected to Torah, you could have been learning, you could have been davening, but found yourself on your 1700th reel for the day, and then that could be like you had the time and you didn't utilize it. So really, these are very minimal things. These are very little teeny things, but these all are Rosh Varalo, and the inner bad within them rises up. Shahara b'nafsho gover bo, and then the evil in his animal soul overwhelmed the good, so it like leans all the way into the animal soul, and then the animal soul is like, yay, you dressed me for the day, thank you. That's literally what ends up happening, because you end up dressing the animal soul. You end up taking the levushim that should be for your godly soul, and you just place them on the animal soul. So now he has charge, and that will cause you to do more bad. Okay? So basically, bottom line, when you do something wrong, you stop yourself and say, what's the litmus test? Am I a rush of a tovlo? I feel bad about what I did. Okay? And even if I did it on purpose, and even if it was little, and even if I only did it once in my lifetime, that's something that you work towards on your tshuva. Okay? So that's a rush of a tovlo. Okay.
It's the children running the house.
That's the children running the house, right? That's where it comes to rationalizing it. The kids who are like, ice cream for breakfast, even though I'm such a big talker because I give my daughter ice cream for breakfast. I'm like, it's
summer.
Protein, it's the summer, it's milk, it's fat, it's chocolate, it's cacao. I don't know, it's something good, right? Like, but let's say like ice cream for supper, and that's me rationalizing it like, oh, it's good for her, right? It is probably. It might be. She needs to get, when she was a kid, so going back to the challah, she did not gain any weight. She still doesn't gain any weight. She would eat like, literally, like, I would take the spreadable butter, breakstone, and she would just eat it with a spoon. Like, that was, because, like, first I'm like, oh, Haagen-Dazs. It was keto. It's keto. Like, Haagen-Dazs has this many calories, but plain up butter is, like, even better. So that's where the animal soul now is dressed with it. That's the rush of a tovlo. That's the kids running the house. That's the emotions being like, let's do whatever we want. We'll feel bad about it. We'll rationalize. We'll say, oh, my gosh, she really needed to hear that information for shidduch purposes. No, she didn't. Or like somebody just needed to vent. You know that? Do you ever get that? Like, I just need a vent. Like you get that message and you're like, oh no, like where's this going? Like, am I in the zone? Like, am I in my Russia state? Am I in my tzaddik state? And then you're like, okay, so let's say that person needs to vent, but let me just not let it infiltrate me. Don't come into my thoughts, my speech and action. Don't let me think about this girl differently because she like vent. Like, you know what I mean? You have to block it out. Okay, so that's Russia of the Tovlo. Now we have Russia Viralo. So now that we understand that what's a Russia? Russia is just a selfish person, right? So what's a Russia Viralo? A really bad person, right? Like, we're like, oh, that's a person who kills all the time, right? Like, that's a serial killer, right? But what's the definition, what's the underlying difference between a Russia Viralo and a Russia Vitovlo? It doesn't feel bad. No guilt. I mean, like, I've watched way too many Criminal Minds episodes, and, what? Psychopath, right? A psychopath. So, by the way, like, when I was learning this, doesn't have to be that bad. It could also be narcissist. And by the way, it could be that he sins less than a Russia Vitovlo. He wants to look up, right? That comes with like this serial killer psychopath personality, right? Like it's always the guy with the slick back hair who like has a job and has like millions of dollars in an account somewhere over, and he just does really bad stuff and doesn't feel bad about it. But it could be he only did it once. A Russia Vitovlo could be doing it all the time. A Russia Viralo is not necessarily a badder person, if that's a word, like a worse person. He's not. He's just somebody that really does it and does not feel bad. So it almost is like his nefesh elokis escapes him. And it like the way that we described it, I remember last time was that like it hovers over him. Like it doesn't really help him navigate it because he basically rejected it. So who is he? So what is this tzaddik? So he says, V'yesh misha harag gover bo yoser, and there's also a person whose evil overwhelms him even more strongly. Umislab shembo kol shlosh levushim shel ra. And in contrast to like what we were saying, the Rosh Hashanah, that like it's maybe just in his thought, it's maybe just in his action. Rosh Hashanah is like completely enveloped by it. In all the areas, the evil is dressed. It is in full-fledged, it's dressed on the runway, like ready to go. It's infiltrated his thoughts, his speech, his actions, everything, and that will actually cause him to commit more serious sins. Like, have you ever been like on like a, okay, so I want to talk about it in the positive way, but like the negative way, when you look, one thing happens, another thing happens, another thing happens. I used to always think of Ellie and the Little White Lie, like that book. Do you know that
diet, like, you know, when you're dieting.
Like a diet, and you're like...
After the first cookie, like a belly cake.
Exactly. So what happens is it infiltrates. So little Ellie and the Little White Lie, which is one of the scariest books from my childhood, like, also because, like, I'm not a pathological liar, but, like, as a kid, like, I have a great poker face. I could say anything. I could be like... What? Imagination, right? Like my daughter, the stories that she makes up. Like first I was like, oh my God, and you see a therapist, and then I'm like, no, she just lives in her world of imagination. And in her world of imagination, we already, she like talks about the birthday parties that's happening and sleepovers that happened ready, right? So it's just like, but it infiltrates everything. It's in all those areas, and it causes them to commit more serious sin. That's what ends up happening. You go on a cycle, and it's downhill from there. So it's umachatio ba'averos chamuros yoser ubi'itam krovim yoser. So it causes them to commit more sins and more frequently. Nevertheless, even with this Rasha, this idea of his sins, like I said, it could be that he doesn't do it as frequently, but the no guilt factor makes it psychopathic. So like Shaistav said that like, you have to be careful of these people because like it's a little dangerous to be around those people who have no guilt, because what happens to you when you're around those people?
You get sucked in.
Right.
Sometimes.
You can justify what they're doing.
You justify, it's desensitized. That's the word. Like, and it's very, very important. Like a chevra and like a healthy chevra, and not one that you have to like, I don't know, I think about this in camp. I always say this story, like we used to have like mishmeres, and it was like, I always like had to change the topic when you're on, you know those people that you go out for lunch and it's just like a gossip session. And then there's those people who are like, it's actually like a learning session. Like, and even though it's like, you don't whip out your Tanya, like it's fine. If you go to Cork and Slice, like just enjoy the food and you don't have to like start learning, but you know that. And I think like for me personally, like as I get older, like Lashon Hara got a little easier, maybe just because I have less time to talk. So it's like, I'm not like my daughter, she's on the phone till 3 o'clock in the morning. I'm like, I'm in bed, I want to be in bed at 10 o'clock, you know? But when you're around certain people, the chevra, it has an effect on you. So when you're hanging out with Rishayim, like like selfish people, let's say when you're hanging out with selfish people, it really does have an effect, and you have to be careful. So don't think like you're going to come in like a hero on a white horse and save all the Rishayim, right? No, you can distance yourself. You could build a little bit of a boundary in a wall, but like if you want to help them, you have to find the pneumius within that person. You have to really find the good in that person to help them. And not that we should be doing this. Like our job is really striving to be known. But if you find yourself amongst Rishayim that are like that, you have to remember where they come from. Like they are Yidden. It might be a little scary, but just be careful. Like just
Do we have to help them or
less
just help
interaction.
ourselves?
So we don't have to, but if you find the goodness in yourself, and also if you perfected yourself and you're like, I could be a positive energy on that person, then yeah, you could help guide them, like healthy boundaries.
I was gonna
We
say, like,
we
just
have
be
this,
more
by the way. I'm
open,
making
like-
it sound like this is like this random topic. You have this all the time, all day long, with all the, whether it's your kids, whether it's your family members. Like I don't want you to be like, oh, she's a Russia, like you know, like you shouldn't be like that. But realize that these characters are real people and they're alive. And sometimes it's us. Sometimes it's us. Sometimes I've done so many things wrong so many times and I don't feel bad about it. That could be within you. So you want to find yourself within it. You don't want to get lost amongst yourself. You want to be able to find it. And sifting through to find your nefesh elokis, to find your godly soul is a good reminder. It's like keeps you in touch with who you are. So just remember that like these are like levels of people, levels of neshamas, but who do you want to surround yourself with? And be careful, but you don't have to like actively do it. We're going to actively work on ourselves, and then hopefully by example, then it just spills over. I like that's one thing like my mother-in-law always taught me, like right, we can't fix other people, and I feel like the more you keep your house safe and in the values that you want, it automatically is a built armor for your children and for your family members when they go out to the outside world, because they're going to meet kids, right? Like in camp, there's always like that one kid who's like, they get packages every single day, right? Like great, they have a great mommy. So if you want to protect your kid and be like, that's not so normal, right? But also the more that you give to your kid at home, let's say like your kid won't come home, we have this, like the kids are like, oh, they talk about his sneeze and the length of my skirt, and honestly like straight up my daughter was like, I know it's a 3 weeks and I can't cut my hair, but I'm so scared that in camp that the rule has to be a certain length of your hair. So can I get a heter to cut my hair in the 3 weeks for a thing of sneeze? And I'm like, no. You know where we hold when it comes to sneeze. If it's really that bad, put it in a pony. But like, you know enough that like that's not real. That is built on through inner work, like teaching your family and building armor enough that the whatever Rishayim or the outside voices are quieted. Understand? Like we don't have to actively go out there and be like, there is no halacha about how long maybe there is, I don't know, of how long your hair should be. But whatever it is, when you build up enough inside, you could be on the offense. You don't have to be on the defense all the time. That makes sense? Yeah? Okay. We'll end here. And so that's a Rosh Hashanah. And then what we're going to do starting next week is the concept of the Benoni, who he is, and that's really what we're striving for. Next week is Tisha B'Av. Oh, no.
You're gonna
not gonna do, how many on
Should I just?
Times fast?
Oh wait, but our kids don't have kin, right? Okay. I could do Monday if anybody wants to do Monday. Oh, are you not allowed to learn? Right after October. What about Monday morning?
Monday after school.
We could do Monday. I'll just put on a poll. If anybody wants to come and learn about the Benoni, we could do Monday. No pressure. Okay. Okay. Thank you.